Oh, really?
Strak. We're waiting for anybody. Shall I start? Right, so Key Vault is, I think the big important question is, before we start with Key Vault, is on your banking system, your internet banking, how do you store your passwords, right? And I'm hoping that you tell me is like one of these products. So I'm hoping your personal banking information is stored in a place that is actually secure and not on a notepad on your desktop. However, the reality is that this often is not the case. I guess most of you have your SQL connection strings in text files on your desktops, flying around in emails. Now, the thing is we can encrypt our data at rest. We can do all those things, but if you've got a SQL connection string going across emails, you're wasting all that effort on that encryption. So this is what led me on the path to Key Vault, is how can I store settings and stuff that is secure in a secure manner, and Key Vault answers a lot of that. But what Key Vault is a service from Azure, right? But why is it so special? Now, this device on the right-hand side, that is actually at the heart of what Key Vault does. So that is the more expensive tier, but we'll talk about the tiers just now. And in essence, what that does is when you generate an encryption key, it can never physically leave this device. So you generate the encryption key, and then you request of this device to encrypt your data that you actually need to secure. Now this device has got all sorts of things in, like tamper protection and switches and a lot of things. Now, if you're really serious about your security, you can buy one of these things, but it's quite expensive and you need a server rack to maintain that and all those things. So if somebody were to physically tamper with this device, you'll destroy those keys. So your data won't be accessible, but at least it won't be stolen. So that's sort of like the main reason why you think about these sort of devices, is to ensure that the data that you have secure can never get stolen and be used against you. So we have the device, we have the service, and we know that we now can put these certain things in these devices. Okay, so what kind of things can we put there? So with Key Vault, you can put in secrets. So a secret is just a piece of string. So your typical connection string would be a secret. A password to an FTP site would be a secret. Application ID that you got from a service provider would be a secret. So those sort of things you put in. There's an arbitrary limit on it, which is fairly small, but you're not putting big things in here, so that you're not putting massive data loads in here, as you're putting very small specific things in, like passwords, like connection strings, those things. You can also generate keys, so all your encryption keys can be stored within the Key Vault. So once again, when you generate that key, you can't retrieve that key, you can't download that key. When you back up that key, there's a whole process about backing that up, which is interesting. And then you can also, a certificate is a combination of keys and metadata, right? So your public certificates, your private certificates, or your public-private keys, it's a key with some metadata on. So on that, so let's just quickly show you how Key Vault looks, if you haven't seen it. So fairly simple. All of you familiar with Azure? Anybody unfamiliar with these screens? Anyways, if you are, come chat to me. I'll show you around. In essence, so we've got our keys here. When you ask it to create a key, you've got several options. Your key type, how many bits you wanted, all those things. And then once you've created the key, you can now access it, but you can't view it, you can't interact with it, and then you can set different levels of permissions. So yes. So on the secret side is there's a bunch of secrets. Can you guys see? Shall I zoom in? So I want to show you a little bit more about when you can have multiple keys and stuff. And then on the certificate side, so one of the things that I think is really cool about this is that you can now store your certificates, and these certificates can auto-renew. So for instance, I haven't played with it unfortunately because it's a 3,000 Rand exercise. But if you were to create an app service, so on your app service, you can add a key to your app services. So app services certificates. So when you create this app service certificate, it actually goes and gets your certificate from your certificate provider, and it then puts your private key into Key Vault. So you don't have the case of that there's PBK files floating around the organization. Is you immediately putting that app service with its certificate in Key Vault. And with this is you can set your auto expiry. So if that certificate comes after a year and expires, this service will actually go out for you and go get that certificate. So I've been in the situations before where people forget to renew certificates. It's much more common than you think. This avoids that. So it's really frustrating to be troubleshooting a problem only to realize it's like the operations guys didn't renew it, and it's a case of human error. So doing something like this is, firstly, you've got the security of Key Vault. You know that certificate is going to be fine. You know you can get to it. You can get it used wherever you need, and you also got it renewed. So that is, I think, very appealing to me. Right. So okay. So we've got the service. We know that these keys and secrets and stuff are being stored in a secure manner. But how do we get to that, right? It's no good that we have the service on Azure and we actually can't get to it. So there's a couple of ways that you can authenticate. The first one is the key and the secret, which is the worst one. I would use this if I absolutely have to, but this is rubbish because now you've got a key and a secret in a config file, which to a large degree negates the fact that you've got Key Vault. So not fully, but you've got no control over that key and the secret. Anybody that logs onto that machine can see that web config file, can see that config file, and can get into your key and your secret. So then it takes some of the niceness out of Key Vault. The other way that you can do is a certificate as well. So you can have a certificate to secure your connection as well. So this is the connection from your Key Vault client. So here on the left is our Key Vault client to our actual Key Vault to get the resources. So for instance, if I've got a app service and I need to get a connection string, I can use one of these mechanisms. The best way is the managed service identity. So it's the ability of Azure to actually manage the service identity of the service that you're working with. So every app service can have a service identity. So that's, in my mind, the way that I understand it is that's a lot like your service account or your machine account on the AD physical realm. It's a identity that is managed by Azure. The passwords gets managed by that and all that. But it allows you to actually give that application specific rights into your Key Vault. And I'll show you some of the rights that you can do. On the left, I just highlighted some of the things. I mean, obviously, all the stuff in Azure, almost all the stuff can actually authenticate into Key Vault. Things like your app services, your functions, even VMs. So a virtual machine can also have a managed service identity. So if you're running a VM in Azure, you can give that specific VM access into a specific key in Key Vault. So that opens up quite a few possibilities. And if you really like to struggle, you can use PowerShell as well as a client. Anything that has a REST client can authenticate into this. Right, so I've got a little console app, and this console app, so this Shall I zoom in? This console app is not to demonstrate good coding practices, it's to demonstrate key vaults, so don't judge me.
And don't judge the white Microsoft.
Leave my white background alone. I like my white background. Come now, guys, it's not so bad.
It is bad.
It's not so bad.
This is not an IDE demo.
Thank you. Just close this. Okay. So there's two NuGet packages you need. You need the Azure Key Vault and you need the Azure Service App Authentication. Now the Service App Authentication it's very similar to an OAuth type authentication where you're passing keys and you're getting certificates and then you pass or tokens and you're passing that token into Azure Key Vault. So the app authentication does that for you, and then the Key Vault is just a wrapper around all the stuff that you can do in Key Vault. So I've got an encryption URL here. This encryption URL is pointing to my actual security key that I'd like to use. Now, if you want to get fancy, is you can loop through all the keys in your Key Vault. All of those things are possible. So the scenarios that I'm thinking where this would be applicable is Key Vault obviously has a cost associated to it. And each time that you go get a key, there's a cost associated to it. Okay, but if you've got 10,000 records in your database that you want to encrypt, you probably don't want to encrypt every record with Key Vault. But the key that you use to encrypt your database records, you can encrypt in Key Vault. So you can start doing those sort of like interesting things to save a lot of cost. Not that it's expensive. It's literally for 50,000 key requests, I think you pay like 50 cents or something ridiculous like that. It's not a lot of money. Right, so there's my key. So going into my key. Okay, and there's my resource. This part at the end is the actual version. So for instance, if organization has got a key refresh policy, you can set up that key refresh policy here automatically. So you don't have to remember to every 2 months refresh a key or whatever the case may be. Right, so that's where I get my key. So in essence, we start off and we say, it's like, go get me my Key Vault client. So this get token gets my auth context. It then has this client's ID and a client secret. Now that's the first security mechanism that I showed you, the one that I would try not to use. But in certain scenarios, like a console application and stuff, it might not be so bad. So how you get this client ID is the part that stumped me for a little while. Is in Azure Active Directory, you actually have to go and register or create an application. So if we go to app registrations, okay. So that application ID is the client ID that they're referring to there. And yeah, let's not talk about the naming, but it's the same thing.
Also based upon the subscription that you've got in Azure as well. I think that.
Well, you need to create your application in the right subscription because when you give this access into your Key Vault, that's the important part.
Yeah.
So this client ID.
And that's where you can tie it up with your with the management, that little red toolbox.
That's right.
Yeah, to tie it up against with that makes it easier to work with as well.
Okay. So this is where I create my keys. You can set these keys to expire after. So what I do with these keys is for every application that I have that needs to access this, I'd create a separate key for this and have your keys separate so that if there's a VM that goes bonkers or something, you can actually shut that down. When you create these keys, you can just give it an arbitrary name. When I save it, this is the only time that I will actually see this key. So if you don't store this right now, and for the crying out loud, not in a text file on your desktop. There's tools for that sort of thing. Right, okay, but now you've got your key, you've got your application ID. that gets my client credentials. So this will actually now give me access to say is that I can authenticate as this application to Active Directory. It still doesn't give me access into Key Vault, right? So I need to go into Key Vault specifically and give that access. So the way to do that, so the access policies is where you control a lot of these things. So that is, let me remove this and re-add it. Okay. So you can select your principal now. Okay, so there's our demo console. So once I've selected entity, I can now tell it what it can do. So you can be quite restrictive here to say, like, you can, keys, yeah, we're looking at keys. So you can get a key, you can get a list of keys, and you can encrypt and decrypt, but you can't do anything else with that. So in our scenario is we are just going to encrypt and decrypt some data, which is not very exciting, but it proves the point. I remember that save, that's caught me out a couple of times. Right, so not a very smart application. It just starts up, gets some input, sends it to Key Vault. So okay. Right. My breakpoint didn't work, but okay, doesn't matter. So all that I'm doing here is I'm getting info from the console, that ABC that I just typed. I'm then turning that into bytes. I'm taking my bytes and I'm asking Key Vault, can you please encrypt this? Specifying what key to use, and then it returns me my encrypted string. So here we go, there's my encrypted payload, and that's all done. The encryption part is done on Key Vault in that secure environment or on that physical device. And then if you were to want to do the reverse, it's the same process, right? So instead of going encrypt, you just go decrypt, and you get the same thing out. So that's for using a key. We haven't really found a use for these encryption keys. I'm sure there are. We use the secrets heavily.
Yeah.
So
Also use secrets quite a lot.
okay. So I think the thing that I like about this entire environment is the fact that I do not wish to know SQL Server connection details. If I do not know what the production SQL Server connection details are, and I cannot get actually access to the production database, there's nobody that can accuse me of fraud, right? So if I don't have access, I can't break something. And I think to a big extent, Key Vault allows you to separate your development team from the operations team and make it easy for both of us to actually just do our job. So in the Key Vault environment, so the Key Vault service and the different workloads that we have are all protected inside of the Azure environment. So you can set firewall settings on these Key Vault environments as well, to say it's like nothing from the outside can come in. So like the example that I just ran with that console application, if I were to set the firewall that you can't come in from the outside, then that would never have worked. So we've got quite open policies on that at this point. But you can start locking it down, and the operations team can then lock this down. But what gets interesting is that you can now have Key Vaults for your dev environment and your production environment. And the only difference between that two would be a vault URL. So your app setting now, I'll show you in a sec, but your app setting has this benign Key Vault value in. And even if you have that Key Vault value in, there's nothing you can do with that Key Vault if you don't have the right permissions. So we can now get to a scenario where we can say, is like, you know, App service number 3, I want to give you access to list the keys on Key Vault. That VM that needs to update that FTP site and change that password, it's got access to set those values. So you can very specifically set your different workloads with very specific permissions. And it also gives you opportunity to give people that is perhaps not developers or not operations teams to set your resources. So for instance, the things that I think around that is application keys and IDs. Is as a developer, you probably don't care about the company's Facebook page, but marketing probably does. And so marketing maybe has control of the application keys and stuff. So let them control that's in their realm. From your point of view, your code is going to say is like, I'm interested in setting called connection string, or I'm interested in the Facebook ID, or whatever your scenario is. So your scenario is agnostic of the fact that you don't have access to that actual specific security. Right, and so I think in an environment where you have got strong control over the operations, I think this is a workflow that makes sense to me. So for instance, your developer will be writing the code and the configuration. And in the code, it's going to reference a specific Key Vault key. When it's released, is at that point operations then takes over of your actual production Key Vault. So you can have a dev Key Vault if you need to. There's also another mechanism that you can use user secrets on your local development environment where you don't even need to hit a Key Vault. And I'll show you that. But then operations can go and change a SQL connection string, or they can update a password, and they can go change a Key Vault, and you don't need to be involved in that process. And so I quite like that from the fact of that we as developers can be responsible for the code and can be responsible for all the areas of the code that we need to be responsible for. But when it actually is released, then we can say to the operations team is like, guys, you want to run your SQL server and you want to have a password that is 400 characters long, that's fine. Go set up Key Vaults. If you've changed your password, we don't have to care about that. Right, so I quickly want to show you.
And today you'd have to do a hot fix by getting somebody to go onto a server and change an app config file.
Or you get the connection string and email, and you can paste it in the config string, right? That's.
They wanted to update the password of the SQL SQL box. And I said, okay, well, we want to do another release today. Can somebody please go onto the server somehow and change that?
That's right.
Or
yeah.
Now you just log into Azure DevOps.
So, okay, so I created a little website here. Now, I realize that this is a talk about security, and I'm actually now putting Key Vault secrets onto a web page, and I know that's very counterintuitive, but it's to show you guys. So, that is how my website knows where to go. So, I've given it a Key Vault URL, and that's the only thing that I need to specify. So, in your app settings, when you've released this on your IIS, wherever you're running this, that is what you're going to be changing. So anybody can come in here and see this. That's not what makes it secure, right? So what does make it secure is we've got those same NuGet packages that I mentioned earlier. And then we've got a normal web host builder here, right? So we're loading up our app settings, so that's where it's getting our Key Vault URL from. We're asking it for what is our actual endpoint for Key Vault. We're creating the Azure token provider, which is actually giving us authentication into Key Vault. And then we're creating our Key Vault client. So just with a callback. And then all that we say is add our Key Vault to our configuration. So now your configuration doesn't care anymore where your config is coming from. So if your config is coming from app settings or it's coming from Key Vault, your code doesn't know. Your code doesn't care. There's also this feature that I found quite useful. It's add user secrets. So a user secret, I'll right click over here, I can go manage user secrets, and this JSON file is in my document. So this is not a file that's in source control. This is very specific to my machine, and in here I've got a whole bunch of settings. So this means that I don't have to hit Key Vault every time I press F5. The other thing that's nice about this is you've got a database connection string in your Key Vault, right? I mean, this is why we're doing this whole exercise. But now you want to use your local database, and you don't want to go onto the production server and go localhost whatever. So you add your database connection string over here, and you've got your database settings.
There's a best like proxy out a dev version of Key Vault and use that as the underlying data?
No, it's actually quite nice. It's the configuration of the .NET Core. It just injects it into that.
Okay.
So when you load up your configuration,
but it's not in XML, it's in JSON now.
It's in JSON, that's right. And this is this little part. So this part is not Key Vault specific. I wanted to show you because I feel it's useful.
Okay, so it's not Key Vault, but Key Vault doesn't care if it's coming from. So by doing that, you're essentially just creating local configuration. And Key Vault will then go and find it.
Yeah. So
does it take preference? Will local supersede server settings?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Right,
So
that's fine. But I mean, you could still have an app config file there in XML.
Absolutely.
And it would still pick that up as well.
Absolutely.
Developer secrets is just nice because you don't have it in source control.
That's right.
Okay.
So I could have just as well, instead of having that secret file, I could have had that configuration in my app settings.json. I'd have exactly the same experience.
Okay.
So my code wouldn't care.
Okay.
So
you just don't really want to be littering your local, your source controlled files.
That's the thing.
And then having to remember to not check them in and stuff.
That's right.
It's a very cool feature.
Okay. So while that's starting, let me just show you where.
I like how it's just an extension. So
it's fantastic. It's like
you don't have to use it. You can dev away as if it's not there.
I'd want some of this and some of that and sprinkle some of this on top. Right. Let me just get back.
I think some people might be deterred from using stuff like that, where they think, okay, cool, I will use Key Vault. Oh, but let's look at it later. We have to implement it. There might be some learning ways.
It's just there.
It just extends what you've got now, and you don't even have to change your application.
Yeah. So in the settings controller, just want to show you how I get to my Key Vault. I've got a configuration, which is just loading up my simple configuration, and then I want to show you a little bit about how you can have a little bit more complex information. And then I'm just passing that config through to a view. So this is not the important stuff. I just want to show you how it looks. Okay, so I've got my simple guy here. Right. So this is literally what you can be doing. Obviously, you won't be doing this in a view. You're probably doing this in other places. But I can literally go and say, give me all my configuration settings that I've got. And this will now load all your configuration providers. So this could, depending on your setup, it could be a Key Vault, it could be app settings, it could be other settings files that you have, it could be user secrets. So right, I don't have access to that. Luckily, I prepared another one.
Just while you're checking it out. So, app settings in your web config, in web app, if they change, it only reflects when the application pool is recycled or reset or anything.
That's right.
There's the same apply to Key Vault. So if something changes in Key Vault, it will only reflect in your app.
That's
that the app pool is recycled.
That's right.
It'll catch those things. It's still
it's catch it locally like a normal config.
As far as the web app's concerned, it is
local.
Yeah.
Except on the application start, it'll go retrieve it.
Yeah. Which is interesting because you don't. There's a bit of a trade-off both ways. If you go fetch it each time, you've got the fresh settings, but then you're incurring that cost every time you hit Key Vault.
Do you have the option to do that?
I was scared for this question. There is events and funny things that you can register as well, which I think you can do that. So I know with Service Fabric is you've got events that you can fire based on your configuration changes, which I think by default I haven't seen that, so I haven't
Yeah,
done
so it'd be
that.
nice if you could just say, next time you go to app settings, don't use the cached settings, as opposed to having to recycle your app pool, which is like quite like a shotgun approach.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to just say, cool, I know you always use cache, but next time don't.
Well, the thing is if you've got your load balancer set up correctly, and you've added key vault settings, haven't you tested this in your staging environment before you swap the slots? See, if you take that approach, then new settings is never an issue. And then what's nice about that is your existing settings is running, you know it's not going to break. You test it on your staging slots. Then once everything is hunky-dory, because that staging slot has just started up. It's gotten the freshest settings. Then when you're ready, you swap. So
yeah, that's the way to get around it. It's also more of a big batch approach, but
So you're not supposed to be changing things in the production system.
yeah.
And that's really dodgy, but still, if you needed to,
yeah.
like
You
if
could
some,
manually go and fetch it in the code, so that every request that comes in will go and retrieve it.
so that's also not ideal. You almost want to say, you know how you can recycle app pool, it would be nice if you could just like recycle that app pool's keyboard cache.
Well, inherently, if you recycle Apple, aren't you restarting the web service anyway? So wouldn't it be rereading your app settings anyway?
Yes, but we don't want to do that. It's just such a shotgun approach. It's like, cool.
Probably a
Everything
couple
we
of
lose is like,
other things
you're
that
all
you-
cache across everything.
Yeah.
If you only care about this. Anyway, yeah, if you do your shit right, you shouldn't have that problem. So,
Right.
For normal app settings, I know there's an option you can say reload on change. So then when you save it, that's only the app settings are JSON.
yeah.
And then for everything there's consequences, because now you've got a file monitor on that file.
Yeah.
So
It comes out that you shouldn't have to do that. The fact that you want to do it in the first place is probably your first indication that you're doing something wrong. So I think that's what Rihanna is sort of alluding to, is that it's not a problem because
yeah, so I'm not
it's supposed
telling
to be used like that.
I'm not telling you how to do your implementation. I'm showing you that there's this tool that you could not use.
It doesn't offer that feature because that's basically saying, yeah, we have a feature to cater for your hacks.
Yeah, but also remember is that
It's not necessarily hacks though, it comes down to the fundamental reason why you're using key vaults. So you put your stuff in there so they're secure,
that's
and they can be changed at any point in time and affect all of the various applications that are using this one vault for access.
Yeah.
So now something's being compromised, and you go to the vault and you change access there.
you stop
Now,
it right there.
you've
Yeah.
got the challenge of having to wait for recycling or refreshing on every single app that's using this key vault. Now, what's that period of time until they get the new credentials?
Yeah, no,
So-
you make a valid point.
But
Yeah,
wouldn't
so-
this other thing crash? So let's say you upgrade like a password on your database, right? So you close your key vault, you update your connection within the
Yeah, everything will stop. Yeah, there'll be server errors everywhere. because things
Yeah,
don't
that's the
access.
thing, your app's gonna fail until it restarts itself and goes and grabs new credentials. So how do you notify that so you don't incur that downtime
Yeah.
when you change?
Look, Key Vault is not your configuration management, and I think that's the important thing to remember is Key Vault. We've gone down the route where we had a lot of settings and stuff in Key Vault, and yes, it's convenient because now I don't have to go change app settings and stuff. But in retrospect, that's not the right place to do it. So there's your app settings should still be your app settings, and how you manage your app settings should still be separate from your key vault. The thing that we're doing over here is we're making sure that connection string isn't flying around in emails anymore. It's because now there's no reason for somebody to actually send you a connection string. I send you what key to update for me in production, and you update that to wherever you got that secret from. So I think that's sort of important. Okay, so the screen just loops through all my settings that I've got available. And there you can see there's quite a bit. So let's just go find that connection string. Okay, so there's my connection string. And that's now the connection string. Let me show you. I've neglected to show you that. So in my secrets. Okay, there's my connection string. And how I've experienced it mostly that we use it, obviously you don't have hard-coded strings, but you would probably be using the index to access your specific keys. So depending on how you manage your application, having a constants file or something like that, that's probably what you'll do over here.
But that hasn't changed. It's how you've always done it.
That's the thing. So your connection string combined with the fact of this, that's telling you to what vault are you authenticating and what secret in that vault are you accessing. So this code as it stands right here, if I were to deploy to production, this key vault URL will change. That's the only thing. So obviously your setup and your permissions and stuff is going to change a little bit. Yes, so then the thing that I quite like the most is I really despise string settings. I think we've gone beyond that. So I've created some setting files here. So it's just plain old class files. So I've got a key vault options class, and in that options I've got a list of authentication providers. So every authentication provider has got an authentication URL, a key and a secret. So through the magic of .NET Core, by adding that in, so having my app settings in there, or having my add user secrets, I can now start having things like that. So I take in an I options of key vault options, and now I've got a nice strongly typed settings object. So just to show you guys, so I've got now my complex settings. Okay, so there I've got my authentication providers. I can take my first one, and I've got also I've got a URI in there. It's maybe a bit far for you to see, but that authentication URL is actually a URI. It's a string. It's a secret. Now before in the old .NET 4.6, to get this sort of flexibility is you had to do quite a bit of heavy lifting. But all heavy lifting that I had to do was add in my settings like that, add my user secret, and create a class that can actually keep that structure. So I really like that. I think it's fantastic that we can have settings where we no longer have having a bunch of strings passed in to get me my URL. So just to show you how this complex page now starts to look. So now I can start having code like that, which I just like a lot more. So I can say for every provider in my authentication providers, give me my key, give me my secret, give me my authentication URL. And if I now look at my secrets, that's how the actual configuration looks, right? So there's my authentication providers, just give it the same name as a class. There's my key, there's my secret, there's my authentication URL. That's as simple as that.
And is it used, does it resolve this to a class name through convention?
Through convention. So if you've got those same names, I'll show you, because you guys are curious. That's so the add user secret is what does a lot of that. So adding the JSON files, doing my configuration through that does part of it. So if I add my user secret or my app settings or JSON file, both of them will do that. And then this
so it must just be deserializing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It probably just tries to deserialize that file to that class.
And then if you made a hash of it, you get nice error screens. But it's fairly simple. Okay, so that's sort of cute, right? But how can I get this on Key Vault? It would be really cool if I can get this on Key Vault in that same manner, and it turns out you can. So this is my production environment running. So there's our complex settings. So that's just our table. So here I've got a list of keys coming through. So Twitter, LinkedIn, your super secret, all those things. And so let's say we want to take one of those keys off, right? By virtue of just following that convention is you can have a collection of strongly typed objects in your settings. So if I want to remove one of those guys, I can literally just say disable. Okay, and now comes a conversation about, yes, but I need to restart it. That is the price you pay. But if you restart the app pool,
But you're going to have that same problem, like, it's not, without key vaults.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if any of those the key vault media packages have a
event.
yes, there's something in there that you can just say, okay, refresh settings or retrieve.
And it just publishes something
Yes.
which the application listens to and recycles that cache pool, or like that.
Any API endpoint on your controller, like, just.
I mean, you could home bake your own one,
You could.
but you would think that something so simple would be there. Although, like, I think, like what Rene is saying is like, they're kind of saying, well, that's your problem. Like, we're building this. How you want to use it is up to you.
So what I like about this is that it comes to you and says like, oh please, you need to add this thing. That becomes adding another element to a collection of configuration elements should be trivial, right? It shouldn't take a lot of brain power. With this it becomes quite easy. So just want to show you how to set up that security as well.
It's funny is if you disable something, I get changing something that maybe things are still going to have the old cache. So if you disable something, you almost expect it to everything to like stop working.
Yeah.
So now okay, it can't be found.
I knew this coming in, right? I mean, this is not a surprise. Yeah. Okay.
Just because I couldn't really see from the start, what was your syntax you used for the collection-based thing there? Was it dash something you put there, a number?
Yeah, so let's look at that. So secrets. So if you
Can't really read that.
I can't read it in number.
What's wrong with you guys? so that dash is defined by, I'll show you that library now, but yeah, so if you have a collection of things, you just prefix or just end it with a number. And if you've got an object within an object or a property within an object, you can just separate it with a dash.
That's all convention based.
Yes, and if you combine this with app settings, so your app settings in your app services it's a colon. So this exact same syntax works on app settings as well. It's just a colon, just to keep you on your toes.
Okay.
So
just in case you get confused.
In case you get confused. So that's a cool thing, is this can be an extension to that. The other thing that you also have on this, which is really nifty, is you've got versions. So I can't go change the existing one. I can add a new version.
Can you set expiry?
Yes, you can set expiry as well. So
I'm like, yeah, it seems like when it expires, it's going to publish a whole thing. You can't use me anymore.
Right. So there's your super safe secrets. If you add new version, yeah.
You said that you can configure it to always go to key vault if you want to.
So that's just a function of starting up. So if I take up this and it won't.
Always don't cache, always go to key vault. And you said that you just kind of want to avoid that because it's more, I mean, you don't want to be calling off the key vault every single time.
You're asking a lot of questions now. I'm not sure.
Because I'm thinking maybe what if you can do is add a settings level to say something, for instance, always go to key vault for the connection string, but you can cache these things.
Like, look, you've got the key vault clients, and with the key vault client, you can do things like encryption, all those things. So if this is currently, it's just adding my key vault as extension onto my existing R configuration store. So if that is not floating your boat and you want more specific control, like what you're describing, I think then you have to go to the actual Key Vault client and use the Key Vault client directly.
Okay.
Because what this is basically doing is it's going to my iConfiguration IOC provider and saying it's like, here's a bunch of key providers. And those key providers are the guys that are reading from your Key Vault and then caching that.
Or reading from your XML file, I mean your JSON file right there on the server.
So
Yeah, it depends. It doesn't know what implementation of that provider happens to be used.
that's right.
So if all it cares, like it is essentially cached.
Yeah. I would pursue that by saying it's like, okay, so let's write our own implementation of this so that we can get those key stores in a different way. So you're still using your IOC, you're still using your iConfiguration provider. So the person consuming that still wouldn't know the
maybe
difference.
adding another layer of abstraction.
You're probably just adding. So I mean, this is just helping you, and it's this default Key Vault secret manager. It's that guy that does the dash conversion into actual object.
I'm interested if there is any sort of out-the-box options around, I would like to always try and get the freshest version of this, but I don't care if this one's, sometimes you can, with caching, you can often say.
Well, how do you register your application against a Key Vault and give it permission?
Right. So I showed you the app key and the secret, which is the rubbish way, and you can do certificates as well, which is the other rubbish way, because then you forget to renew the certificate. I think the right way to do this is if you go to your actual dashboard. Right. And they've recently changed this, like within the last couple of weeks. On app services, now the cool thing is this is available on VMs in Azure as well. So you can do identity. Now by default this is off. The moment you turn this on, it becomes registered within Active Directory as an application. But Active Directory is now managing this application's credentials. So now you've got an application in Active Directory, and it's this application that we need to give access to Key Vault. So I'll go here. So that's my demo console one. That's the one that I created with the ID and the key on its own. This is my Key Vault. This is the actual application that is registered with Active Directory by turning on that, they called it a MSI, so Microsoft Service Identity.
Okay, so you're making almost like a trust relationship using AD as opposed to certificates.
Yeah, which is the awesome thing, is because the administrator in your organization, you want to give access to change your database connection string. Your application, you want to give access to read that connection string. You don't want to do anything else, right? So.
Well, I was hoping that there would have been an endpoint or URL that you could get it, so that when something changed, you could inject it in.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find something for you guys, just because. Yeah.
In Azure's DevOps, you can set up like trust between applications. You can say this one's only allowed access to this one and this one. Is it? But I've never. I was playing around with it a while ago, and I didn't have to install any certificates. Does it do that under the covers?
So because Azure DevOps also runs under a Microsoft Service Identity, you can give your DevOps environment access into your Key Vault. So if you need to, like for instance, one of the things that we had to do is run SQL scripts on a database. But I didn't want to have control of the database connection string. I can use the same connection string over here for my application, as well as my Azure DevOps to execute SQL code on my SQL database. So my deployment pipeline doesn't have database connection strings. My deployment pipeline points to my Key Vault, which is, I think, also quite a nice thing.
Would you say that trust relationship or authorization through AD from application to application and not just users is a recent thing?
No, sorry. That's been around for a while. It's the fact that you've got, you can specify now, and I haven't played with this, but you can specify custom identity as well. So under this.
Oh, okay, so not just within Azure DevOps.
I'm not sure what the use case for this is. I don't know why would you, I don't quite understand why you would want to manage this yourself. Like, why would you want to create your own identity over here? Why not
Usually
just
you just
have-
go and say this application can talk to this application.
But clearly this has been a request, but I know nothing about this. So
It's like you've got an application which is deployed not on Azure.
Yeah, so it's like you can
Could be.
outside of
And
your.
then you don't have access to the application there.
yeah, could be that.
So then do you have some sort of like IDP that's to, you know. if
I
you-
think this user assigned is like,
Who's passing this through?
I wonder if this system
Maybe sign
assigned,
up.
Yes. Well, it's probably in the application itself.
so in
It
the,
uses those credentials to retrieve what the values in the keyboard.
in the normal environment where you've got 80 is you've got a machine account that you can give access to things, right? But you also got a service account. Is this user assigned not a service account? Where you've got a specific 80 credential that you add in here? I don't know.
Maybe, yeah.
I think
It seems like
That's a
that.
whole nother topic, is the security within
the
Azure.
user to log in, is
Yeah.
to retrieve the key vault stuff. So the first one is like your system. So you know your system has to retrieve obviously this keys from key vault, right? But now how do you give your DevOps administrators access to key that stuff?
Okay?
Isn't that maybe what that is?
No. This is giving, remember, this is my app service, right? So this is, I'm using the wrong terms, but it's to help you with the picture. This is my IIS settings, okay? So this is under what credentials are my IIS running? That's the question that you're answering here. Is, so if I say I've got a system assigned credential, is then you've got another level of permission that you can assign. If you didn't have this, is you wouldn't be able to authenticate into your key vault, and then you have to have the keys or secrets, all sorts of funny business. So then within, and yeah,
Or your consuming application wouldn't be able to authenticate against the keyboard application.
yeah. So it's allowing you to not have these config settings and all sorts of stuff. Is where you can say it's like that specific IIS machine with that machine account, that guy can access this file system and write to it, or can access that. In here is you can add your normal 80 stuff, right?
Is it download file system, or is it another application? Because you've got these applications and you're saying the account running on this app like can access everything, the resources served by this.
Yeah, I'm using file system just to help with the picture.
Yeah,
but
but it's essentially
that
saying
picture.
like this IIS can access that IIS
That's right.
because they're running under
Yeah.
the credentials which have been.
And there's a whole bunch of firewall rules and stuff that you can add into that.
You leverage an AD as opposed to trying to go and do your own version or having to manage certificates.
That's right. So you'll add your security groups in here. So when you select your principal, this is retrieving active directory. So for instance, I could be saying,
You just did your own users, so they would actually assign a group or something.
I would assign a group. I would not assign a user,
Yeah.
but yes, that's in essence. And then you can vary the level of permissions that they've got here.
So they call access policy,
Yes.
gaining access, and
Yes.
then user allocation is actually user account.
And what's interesting is by default you've got certain permissions on your subscriptions. So even if you are a fairly high level of permissions, is if you create a Key Vault demo, for instance, the fact that I'm authenticating from my Visual Studio into Key Vault is down to this access policy to say is that this guy is allowed to come in. Is if I revoke this and I press F5 now, it's not going to work. My Visual Studio is going to say, because it will actually use your Visual Studio credentials to pass through to the credentials over here.
Your Azure portal, like what you use to log into Azure.
Right, so just as a final thought, so
If you're not signed into Visual Studio, then it also wouldn't work.
it also it's not a case of if but when. So every 72 seconds or every second 72 records are being stolen. This is a fact. So if we've got encryption at rest, if we've got firewalls, all these things, but we're emailing connection strings in clear text, this is going to happen to you. That's just a guarantee. And before we had excuses, it was too difficult. But setting up a key vault takes minutes. there's really no excuse for you not to use it.
And you can, even if you haven't got it, you can still set it up, and your application,
Yes.
with some very minor changes, your application will seamlessly start using it as a instead.
And you don't have to have everything in Azure. If you're running an IIS locally, you can still go and use your key vaults. And guys, it's dirt cheap. It's 50 cents per 10,000 transactions.
Is it 16 per key per vault? I mean, per key per month or per key vault per month?
16 Rand per key per month. The difference between premium and standard is the standard key vault runs on VMs. So on the VM itself, it will use encryption key that is stored within the premium layer. So premium means those hardware devices, standard means it runs on the Azure VMs. So the standard stuff that runs on the VMs still is backed with a hardware key. But the premium is you've got some space on one of those devices for your keys.
Which is actually tamper-proof.
Which is tamper and all of those beautiful things, yeah.
So premium is just more safe.
Yeah. So the typical.
Will it still be at the same place that the standard one is?
Sorry, which?
We say the hardware modules are still tamper-proof,
Yeah.
right? But now any vulnerability would probably be on the Azure front end, so Azure portal side, maybe some password gets stolen or whatever. So the difference between standard and premium from a user perspective is really nothing.
Okay, but remember is we can't get a key out of premium, right? So you can't ever get to a key.
Right.
You can only encrypt stuff with the key. So the key can never leave the environment. So even if they compromise the portal, even if they get inside the Azure network, they still can't get to your key. So I think that's the distinction. And even with the VM side is, yes, you're encrypting on a VM, so you don't have that physical hardware that's encrypting, but the key that you're using to encrypt is coming from the hardware. So it is still the hardware level. That's it. So.
Cool, man. That's really cool.
The same demo you showed, I assume that encryption stuff is not supposed to run outside Azure, because if you're sort of sending clear text over the wire, encrypt it somewhere in your key vault, premium or whatever, and send you back the encrypted string.
Okay, but explain to me. I just want to back up. So you're not sending clear text over the wire, right?
So
this is a secure connection between you and Azure Key Vault.
So just go back to the first example you showed us with the encryption. That we had an ABC that you.
But you never pass your values to Key Vault, do you?
So you pass your string you pass your data that you want to encrypt. You pass to Key Vault.
Yes, but
okay.
How do you pass that? Because that's theoretically is clear text that goes over the wire.
Over a secure line.
Yeah.
So it's HTTPS.
Yes. Still, if it's smart enough, you can actually still get it. So
back up. How can you get it?
So
just explain to me how you would get that.
Okay, so even if it's on SSL 1 or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are still able to snip out the data transfer. That's why we have stuff like TLS 1.2 now that's obviously more secure. But in a year from now, that should probably will be accessible as well. So what I'm saying is, most probably something like this encryption, doing it like as a standalone application, trying to encrypt stuff to the keyboard, is most probably also not the best. You most probably want that application rather to reside in Azure, so that it's obviously internal on their network.
Absolutely, for sure. If I had a choice, I would never let my secret outside of the Azure environment.
Yeah.
Because it's also a service, is those SSL certificates, I can assure you that there's people with PhDs working on this service. So I feel a lot more comfortable sending information to Azure, let them encrypt it, than managing my own keys. I think managing your own keys, you're opening yourself up for very easily getting compromised.
100%, but it's still better to rather
run it in the Azure environment.
Come up with your password and type it in through the Azure portal, into their interface. It does that is how you set your settings, right? And then that gets encrypted, but it's on that side.
So what this would do, okay, so this, what we describe over here is, if you've got credit card details and you want to encrypt it, right, is what we what this would show you is sending the credit card details to Azure over HTTPS, whatever, encrypting it there, and then coming back.
Oh, okay, okay.
So
Okay, so we're not going to like connection string. That's just for some fingerprints to your credit card number.
that's right. So this
that sort of use case. Right?
Yeah.
So is that pre-determined requirement from them that it has to run over secure non-hash?
That's managed for you with the actual libraries. Yeah, so you can't.
Just do open connect.
No.
Wouldn't
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no.
Your encryption key, you can most likely replace that with a certificate,
Yeah.
which mitigates the problem that you got to think about. And Azure supports the certificates.
So that's why.
So you'd register, it's like peer trust works. You register the
Certificate
certifying
of trust.
certificates, they exchange of the one, and you go subject to that.
Yeah. So this is I'd use this option for demo purposes, and if I'm really stuck. I would much prefer using the service identity. If you can't use the service identity, then your certificate is a much better option.
But that's still only if your application is running outside of the Azure environment.
Yeah.
That's the scenario yes, right?
Yeah.
So
Look,
it's like if your web app is still an Azure application, then you don't really need to do that because you can just give it access to Key Vault like we were showing earlier, right?
yeah, I'm lazy. I don't like to remember a lot of things. So just having one Key Vault URL is my preferred. The other one is you have got these keys and settings and stuff that you have to persist. So if I can just have one URL.
Yeah, I'm just like trying to understand you've got Key Vault obviously in Azure, but then you've got the application which is now going to send the data to Key Vault. Now that can be outside of Azure or it can be inside Azure. If it's inside Azure, then you let Azure do the authentication or authorization because you can just add it as like we were doing just now. You can just go and say you're using AD letting call right? But if you're outside of Azure, then you've got, and now we're going to talk secrets or certificates or something in order to let us safely send this data over to Azure. But that would mean that you actually have a requirement to have your application outside of Azure.
Yeah.
But you can which is it does happen, but if it's your choice, I mean, you wouldn't do that.
So I was thinking around this, the console application. The reason why I showed how you can use the secrets and encryption was just to use encryption. But what I was specifically thinking around Tesco, right? Because Tesco is maybe not going to go into Azure very soon. Okay. Okay. But if there is components in that do require a connection string, is you can still maintain a connection string in Azure. There is some fallback mechanisms to get you to the point of where you can now be in one place. And it's one place to make a change to the connection string is we shouldn't be having multiple applications point to the same database, but in the real world that happens often. So we've got a single connection string. It's a pain to maintain.
I think the secret is all I'm sorry that is what is an encryption and decrypting or sending your credit card information, even if it's over a secure channel, to someone else to encrypt it and then sending back the key. Like that seems like there's room for error in
Okay, but I would hazard is that your alternatives is so much more dangerous than that. So saying that is bad is assuming is that what you're going to do is going to be better. And if what you're going to be doing is going to be better is by having one of those devices in your data center. So saying is that is dangerous, that's right. The alternative is that you have one of those devices in your data center.
Or you just do both application and key vault in Azure, or at least on a network where it's
Absolutely. But it's just to show you that there's a lot of options.
So if you're faced with a requirement which doesn't allow you to that, there is a way around it which is considered acceptable from a perspective.
And don't manage your own secrets and keys.
Just another question. Then when you showed us the provider with that competitor stuff, you have three separate secrets. I think it was secrets also, if I'm correct. I remember at the beginning you said amount of space you can store for each of them are quite small.
Cheers.
Is it literally that small that you can't store sort of adjacent screen?
No, you can. You can actually store. I think it's 15 or 25 kilobytes.
Oh, okay.
So it's not huge, but it's not small.
Okay,
So you can store some JSON in there.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Any questions? I've got the code. Okay. Cheers.
Will you just update your guys and system and then
$50 vir 10,000 goed. Ja. Julle gaan as julle nou Key Vault gebruik op ja, dan gaan julle ek weet nie of julle R1 gaan betaal 'n maand vir daai service nie.
Ja, daardie server moet baie keer